The 2025 NFL trade deadline has now passed, and in my opinion, it was one of the more surprising deadlines of recent memory. We saw multiple deals get done for big name players who weren't even really talked about in the trade rumors, and these deals were finalized with just hours to go ahead of the deadline on Tuesday afternoon. The Jets became the talk of the league as they traded away cornerback Sauce Gardner to the Indianapolis Colts and defensive tackle Quinnen Williams to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to break down a lot of the bigger trades that led up to the trade deadline and on deadline day as well, and give kind of my thoughts for both teams involved in these transactions and what this means for them moving forward into the future. And there's really no better place to start than with the New York Jets. By far the most surprising move of this deadline is the Jets trading away Sauce Gardner. So breaking it out in its entire details, the Colts are receiving Sauce Gardner, and in return, the Jets are getting wide receiver Adonai Mitchell, as well as the Colts 2026 first-round pick and the Colts 2027 first-round pick. So this is the exact same haul, 2 first-round picks and a player that the Packers just gave up to the Cowboys for Micah Parsons earlier this year. So this is a big-time haul for the Jets in this trade. Now, just 4 months ago, the Jets had actually just signed Sauce Gardner to a 4-year, $120 million contract extension, which is what made this so surprising. Nobody thought that he was a player that would be available for trade, and everything that's been reported, the Jets were not even shopping him as an option or for a candidate to be traded until the Colts essentially presented them with this offer that they just could not turn down. Now, looking at this from the Colts side of things, it sends a clear message, not just to their fan base, but also to everyone in the locker room, that they believe that they have a Super Bowl window right now, and they are going all in and taking a big swing at trying to see if they can get another Lombardi trophy there in Indianapolis. And I, for one, really appreciate that. I think we see far too often front offices who sit on their hands and are too afraid to, make that splash trade or that splash signing in free agency for the fear that it might backfire. But as the quote goes for Michael Jordan, you miss 100% of the shots you never take. So I can really appreciate them taking the chance. Obviously, if it works out and pans out for a Super Bowl or playoff success is yet to be seen, but it does put them in a better position because pairing him up with Charvarius Ward on the other side of the field once he gets healthy is a very, very formidable cornerback duo. And this entire defense as a whole has some really key contributors when you also add in guys like Cam Bynum, Kenny Moore, Kwity Paye, Liatu Latu. This is a very formidable defense that Lou Anarumo is going to have to work with come playoff time. So, Sauce Gardner is a guy who's a multiple first-team All-Pro. He was a former Defensive Rookie of the Year. His play has regressed over the last couple of seasons. They're hoping that he can kind of return to that elite-level corner form and be that dynamic pairing alongside Charvarius Ward. And this can help propel the Indianapolis Colts into the playoffs as one of the more dominant teams, not just in the AFC, but in the NFL as a whole. Now, they've played an easier schedule, in my opinion, up to this point in the season and are coming off a relatively tough loss against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But everything is still in front of this team, and they are sizing up to make a deep playoff run. So once again, kudos to the front office there and Chris Ballard, who's the GM in Indianapolis, at going and making this type of splash acquisition and sending a message to that locker room that we are going for it all right now. The other big trade that the Jets made on deadline day was moving Quinnen Williams to the Dallas Cowboys and in return receiving defensive tackle Mazi Smith, as well as a 2026 second-round pick and 2027 first-round pick, both of the Cowboys' selections in those drafts. Now, I've seen a lot of people who don't love this trade for the Cowboys, and I think that's really short-sighted. A lot of the negative analysis around this has been saying that this Cowboys season is essentially lost. There's a very slim chance they're going to make the playoffs, and I, as a Cowboys fan, can say with pretty much certainty that we are not going to the postseason as we sit at 3-5-1 after a pretty embarrassing loss on Monday Night Football to the Arizona Cardinals. But this is not a trade that's only designed to impact this season. Quinnen Williams is going to be an elite defensive lineman for multiple seasons to come. I believe he's only 27 or 28 years old, and I think it's fair to say that we're still going to be able to see high level production for him for at least a few more seasons. And when you look at some of the defensive linemen that are in Dallas currently, you're looking at Quinnen Williams, Kenny Clark, Osa Odigizua, a developing Donovan Ezeraku. There's some real talent here up front for this defense in the years to come. So I don't view it so short-sighted. I think it sets Dallas up in a great position down the line with a guy like Quinnen Williams, who's not only dominant against the run, but also offers so much pass rush upside, which is extremely rare out of an interior defensive lineman. So being able to bring in one of the best, interior forces in the NFL is going to be a win in my book. Again, it is a lot of draft capital that has been given up by Jerry in this one, but Quinnen Williams, I think, is 100% worth that type of asking price. So I don't view it in a negative light. Again, I don't think it's going to impact this season a ton. I think, obviously, the defense is going to be better down the stretch of the season than they were in this first half, but that's not ultimately going to lead to any type of playoff opportunities. Not in this season, but I think in years to come, it's going to be a real difference maker for sure. Looking at this from the Jets side of things, they are absolutely stacked with draft capital for the first two rounds of both the 26 and 27 NFL drafts, with a total of 5 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks across those two drafts. This puts them in a great position to A, draft their franchise quarterback in this upcoming class, whether they have the first pick or not. They have the ammunition to go and trade for whatever guy they would absolutely like in a class that there is going to be a lot of fluctuation, and already has been, in terms of who's the number one quarterback prospect. And I think that's going to go all the way, honestly, up to draft day. I think people are probably going to be torn with some of the top prospects when you look at guys like Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore, Lenoris Sellers, Ty Simpson, all guys who I've seen mocked number one overall already to this point in the year. And we may see some additional shakeup moving on through draft season as well. This gives them that flexibility to potentially make a trade if they need to go and get the guy that they believe can be their franchise cornerstone for the next decade or so in New York. And if they don't have to use that to package together those picks and make a trade for that type of guy, then you can just draft elite top-end talent. So it's really a win-win scenario from that aspect for the New York Jets. This was a team that is 1-7 on the season. It's unfortunate that they had so much talent, but have really been hindered by quarterback play, going all the way back to guys like Zach Wilson a few years ago, which, unfortunately led to this point in the Jets roster where they have to move on from a lot of their really talented young players, but again, we're able to get big-time draft capital hauls as a result. I think it's a big shock that Breece Hall ultimately didn't get moved, and there were reports that teams like the Kansas City Chiefs were engaged in active conversations and just wouldn't come up to what sounded like a third-round pick asking price from the New York Jets. But the Jets ultimately stayed put, did not end up moving on from Breece Hall. If he ends up being a Jet in the long term, I think is still to be seen. I would probably lean towards no, just with all the turmoil that the organization is currently going through. I think he's not going to want to stick around for that, but that's all to be seen. That's for a later video in the offseason with what the Jets are going to be doing with a guy like Breece. But again, surprising nonetheless, because he was significantly more talked about in the trade rumors than Sauce or Quinnen. But ultimately, those guys end up getting dealt at the deadline, and Breece stays put in New York. To wrap up the Cowboys trades, as I mentioned, they also did trade for Logan Wilson from the Cincinnati Bengals, only having to give up a 2026 7th-round pick in the process. So if you felt like they overpaid for Quinnen Williams, they definitely did not pay, a ton for a guy like Logan Wilson, who is a starting level linebacker and was the starter for Cincinnati, albeit is the only defense statistically worse than the Dallas Cowboys this season. And similar line of thinking as the Quinnen Williams deal, Logan Wilson is going to help during the back end of the season, with guys like Kenneth Murray and then particularly Demarion Overshown once he comes back and is healthy. But again, looking to next season, that's just added linebacker depth for a guy who is good in the run, good in pass coverage as well. That's just additional help for this defense to hopefully get them to, just a solid spot with how good this offense is and all of the explosive weapons they have, and with how elite Dak Prescott has been playing this season. The defense doesn't need to be the 2001 Ravens. They just need to be adequate. They need to be run-of-the-mill, average, not giving up 30, 40 points a game. And I think that this team can be a legitimate team in the NFC just with how explosive the offense is. They just have to be able to play some level of complementary football next season. So I think that this ended up being a good deal for the Dallas Cowboys, bringing in a veteran linebacker like Logan Wilson. The Seahawks made a big-time splash at the deadline, trading for wide receiver Rashid Shaheed from the New Orleans Saints, only having to give up a 2026 4th and 5th round pick in the process. I think this is a great trade by Seattle. It just gives them another explosive weapon in what was already one of the best deep passing games in the NFL. They are going to be ridiculously hard to guard when you have to defend against Jackson Smith-Njigba, Rashid Shaheed, Torrey Horton. If Cooper Kupp is healthy, you have to throw him out there for some plays as well. With some of the tight ends that they have in guys like A.J. Barner and Elijah Arroyo, this is an explosive passing offense now. They are going to be very, very versatile come playoff time. And I think Seattle is really still flying a little bit under the radar. You know, now that they've kind of played a big primetime game on Sunday Night Football, I think a little bit more people are starting to wake up to not just how good Sam Darnold is playing, but how good both sides of the ball are playing there in Seattle and how explosive this team is. And they could make some legitimate noise come playoff time, so I really like this deal. I think they're going to be able to absolutely take the top off of any defense they play against. Both JSN and Rashid Shaheed are home run hitters, and Sam Darnold has maybe thrown the deep ball better than any other quarterback that's not named Drake May this season. So really, really love this deal for Seattle. It had been rumored a lot that the Saints were going to be getting rid of either Rashid Shaheed, Alvin Kamara, or Chris Olave. It kind of came out closer to the deadline that they would like to keep Olave in New Orleans for the foreseeable future. So Shaheed, on a guy who I think was on an expiring contract, if I remember correctly, just made sense to end up dealing. They get decent draft compensation in return, but again, really, really like this deal for Seattle. It makes them very, very scary in the passing game going down the back half of the season. Another receiver on the move at the deadline was Jakobi Meyers, who had requested a trade from the Raiders a few weeks ago and finally got his wish granted, as he's going to Jacksonville for a 2026 4th round pick and a 2026 6th round pick. So very similar compensation to what the Saints got for Rashid Shaheed. I like this move for Jacksonville. People had a lot of speculation that maybe this meant that the Brian Thomas Jr. trade rumors had some validity. I don't buy into that at all. What I think this is more likely to mean is Travis Hunter just went to IR with a knee injury that I don't think the details have been fully disclosed on yet. So Jakobi will be able to come in and immediately help fill that void that's been left by his injury. In addition to the fact that I think it will alleviate some of the pressure from Travis Hunter to perform, at a high level on both sides of the ball right away as an instant contributor. I don't think it means that Travis Hunter won't play receiver, but I think it will allow him to focus a little bit more on corner for the time being and be able to be deployed in 3 receiver sets with Brian Thomas Jr. and Jakobi Meyers as well. So I think it adds some versatility to their offense. Jakobi Meyers is a guy who can play in the slot, can play on the outside as well. Travis Hunter, as we've seen, is explosive with the ball in his hands and can be a deep field threat. Brian Thomas Jr., when he's performing at that elite level, is a great route runner, can make contested catches. So they have a very dynamic receiving core now in Jacksonville for Trevor Lawrence to work with. So I like this move a lot for Jacksonville. Again, I think it gives them the flexibility on that side of the ball and frees up Travis Hunter a little bit as well once he comes back from his injury. Let me know what you thought was the best and worst trade of the deadline in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel, drop a like, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any more uploads here on Bash Football. As always, I appreciate your support, and I'm out.